Hello everyone. So my report is all about the expenditure cycle audit objectives, controls, and tests of controls. So pag sinabing expenditure cycle, it is a set of activities related to acquisition of and payment for goods and services, and it is used to minimize the total costs of acquiring and maintaining inventory, supplies, and services. So, Chapter 1 introduced the concept of audit objectives derived from general management assertions about financial statement presentation. And if you still remember, yung management assertion is yung ano, existence or occurrence, completeness, accuracy, mga ganun. So, the specific control addressed here are based on the application controls framework presented in Chapter 7, which classifies controls into three broad categories, yung input, process, and output controls. And it is already been discussed no mga nakaraang chapters. And within this framework, we examine application controls, the subcontrols, and the audit objectives to which they relate, and substantive tests and their relationship to management assertions and corresponding audit objectives are considered later in the chapter. So dito sa 10.1, it represents the relationship between management assertion and yung expenditure cycle audit objectives. Yun nga, sabi ko kanina, yung management assertions, yung existence or occurrence, completeness, accuracy, rights and obligation, valuation or allocation, and presentation and disclosure. So, sa expenditure cycle audit objectives, yung existence or occurrence is to verify the accounts payable balance represents amounts actually owed by the organization at the balance sheet date. And it is established that the purchases transaction presents represents goods and services actually received during the period covered by the financial statements, and dito din na-determine yung mga payroll transactions na nagre-represent ng wages or nagre-represent ng wages for services is actually performed during the period covered by the financial statements. Sa completeness naman, dito din na-determine kung yung accounts payable is represent all amounts owed by the organization for purchases of goods and services as of the balance sheet date, and ina-ensure na yung financial statements will reflect all goods and services received by the organization, less returns for the period covered, and to verify that the financial statement reflects all the wages for services performed during the period covered. Sa accuracy naman, dito in-establish that yung mga purchases transactions is accurately computed ba and based on the correct prices and correct quantities, and ensure that the accounts payable subsidiary ledger is mathematically correct and agrees with the general ledger accounts, and also yung mga payroll amounts ba are based on the correct pay rates and hours worked and are accurately computed. So, rights and obligation, dito naman in-establish that yung mga accounts payable and accrued payroll is recorded at the balance sheet date are legal obligations of the organizations. Sa valuation or allocation, it verifies that the accounts payables are stated at correct amounts owed. And last is yung presentation and disclosure. Ini-ensure na yung accounts payable, accrued, payroll, and expenses ba are reported for the period and properly described and is classified in the financial statements. So, let's proceed to input controls. Pag sinabing input controls, these are designed to ensure that transactions are valid, accurate, and complete. And control techniques are vary considerably between batch and real-time systems. The following input controls relate to expenditure cycle operations are the following: yung data validation controls, testing validation controls, batch controls, testing batch controls, purchases authorization controls, testing purchases authorization controls, employee authorizations, and testing employee authorization procedures. So, yung una is yung data validation controls. So, input validation controls are intended to detect transcription errors in transaction data before they are processed. Since errors are detected early are less likely to infiltrate the accounting records, validation procedures are most effective when they are performed as close to the source of the transaction as possible. So, dito yung validation controls or yung data validation controls is ginagamit siya para ma-detect yung mga transcription errors bago pa man sila ma-input or ma-process. Chapter 7 presented a number of general types of validation tests. Examples that are relevant to the expenditure cycle are reviewed in the following paragraphs. So first, missing data checks. These are used to examine the content of a field for the presence of blank spaces. Itong missing data checks, ginagamit siya to check yung mga incomplete records, and kapag yung validation program is nakadetect ng blank spaces where it is supposed to be or ine-expect na dapat may makikitang data value doon. Itong si missing data checks, parang automatic na ine-interpret niya as error yung na-detect niyang blank space. So, yung ganun. Next is numeric alphabetic data checks. Dito, determine whether the correct form of data is in field. So, for example, the quantity field in the purchase order should not contain alphabetic data. As with blanks, alphabetic data in a numeric field may cause serious processing errors. Next is yung limit checks. It determines if the value in the field exceeds unauthorized limit checks. Itong limit check, dito din na-determine kung yung value na in-input sa isang computer system is within maximum and or minimum and maximum values. So, for example, yung isang firm is nag-set siya ng working hours or may policy sila na yung working hours is hindi lalagpas, kunwari, 44 hours per week. And itong limit checks, dinedetect niya yung mga values na mag-e-exceed doon sa 44 hours na sinet ng isang firm. So, yan. Next is range checks. Assigns upper and lower limits to acceptable data values. Ito namang range checks from the word itself, range. Dito parang nagsiset ng range yung isang company, and kung ano lang yung pasok sa range na sinet nila, yun lang yung acceptable, and the rest will be rejected. Sa validity checks naman, compare actual values in a field against known acceptable values. Dito, ginagamit siya para ma-verify na walang errors na na-represent. Parang ganon. So, this control is used to verify such things as state abbreviation or employee job skill codes. So, if the value in the field does not match one of the acceptable values, the record is determined to be in error. Next is check digits control. Identify keystroke errors in key fields by testing their internal validity. So, itong check digit controls, ginagamit siya to verify a vendor number on a purchase order record. Next is testing validation controls. Data entry errors that slip through edit programs undetected can cause recorded accounts payable and expense amounts to be materially misstated. The following audit procedures provide evidence about the accuracy assertions. The central audit issue is whether the validation program is in the data editing system are functioning correctly and have functioned as intended throughout the period. So, testing the logic of validation program, however, represents a significant undertaking. The auditor may decide to rely on the quality of of other controls to provide the assurance needed to reduce substantive tests. Etong ano kasi, testing validation controls, process siya in which dito ini-evaluate yung software during or at the end of the development process para ma-determine if it satisfied the specified business requirement, and also itong validation testing, ini-ensure niya na yung isang product is actually nami-meet yung meet needs ng clients. Dito sa testing validation controls, halimbawa, after ma-review ng auditor yung systems development and maintenance control. So, ngayon, i-determine na yung controls over sa original program design and testing and subsequent changes to programs is effective. So, itong evidence na to, nagpe-permit sa auditor para i-assess yung risk ng material program errors at a low level, and it will help to reduce the substantive tests na ikakandak. And if yung controls over system development is and maintenance are weak, yung auditor may decide na yung testing data editing control is more efficient compared dun sa pag-conduct ng mas maraming substantive tests of details. So, yeah. Next is yung batch control. So, yung batch controls is ginagamit siya para ma-manage yung mga large or high volumes of transaction data through a system. And yung objective ng batch control is para ma-reconcile yung mga output na naproproduce ng isang system with the input originally entered into the system. So, yung batch control is initiated at the data input stage and continues through all the phases of data processing. The information contained in the transmittal sheet is entered as a separate control record that the system uses to verify the integrity of the batch. So, yung transmittal sheet na sinasabi, siya, para siyang or usually document siya in a large item, and yung purpose ng transmittal sheet is para ma-document yung mga sending of documents, files, or samples, and kadalasan din ginagamit siya para sa ma-update yung isang documents. Periodic reconciliation between the data in the transmittal record and actual processing results provides assurance of the following. So, yung periodic reconciliation between data, transmittal record, and actual processing is nagre-result siya sa una, yung invoices na ini-enter sa isang system is or nagkakaroon ng assurance na lahat ng invoices na ine-enter sa isang system is napoprocess, and walang invoices na napoprocess and paid more than once, and all invoices na ine-enter into the system are accounted for as either successfully processed or rejected because of errors. So, yun nga. Lahat ng ng invoices na ini-input sa isang system is successfully processed, except lang kung may na-detect na error yung system na yon. Dito sa testing batch controls, kapag nagkaroon ng failure sa pag-function yung batch control, it will result to record loss, and tests of batch controls provide the auditor with the evidence relating to the assertions of completeness and accuracy. So, sa pag-test ng batch controls, it involves yung reviewing of transmittal records of batches processed throughout the period and reconciling them to the batch control log. So, si auditor, kailangan niyang i-investigate yung mga out of balance condition para ma-determine niya yung causes ng pagkakaroon ng failure sa isang batch control function. And by reviewing and reconciling transaction listing and error logs, madedetermine ni auditor yung possible reason kung bakit nagkaroon nga ng failure sa pagpa-function ng isang batch controls. So, yun lang. Thank you. Yung next reporter is si Lovely Joy de la Cruz.